Child lobotomy experiments. Imagine a doctor in the 1940s who claimed he could cure hyperactive or aggressive children by cutting into their brains with an ice pick. A deranged man introduced the world to his so-called treatment, lobotomy. He carried it out by destroying the brain's frontal lobes, supposedly to treat mental illness. And he didn't stop at adults. He also targeted hundreds of children. Freeman's method was pure horror. He would slide a thin ice pick into a child's skull, then hammer it straight into the brain. With no anesthesia, the children screamed in unimaginable pain. Freeman insisted this made them docile and manageable. But in reality, the damage turned them into something like zombies, stripped of emotions, robbed of their personalities, some even losing the ability to speak. In 1967, when a patient died during the procedure, Freeman finally lost his medical license. But by then, thousands of lives had already been destroyed. Until his death, this vile man defended himself, saying, "I only serve science." So what do you think, was this really service to science or just cruelty disguised as medicine? Loretta Bender's electroshock experiments. Can you imagine a world where, under the name of autism treatment, no one stopped a maniac from shocking the brains of innocent children for more than 20 years? It was nothing short of a nightmare. In 1942, at Bellevue Hospital in New York, child psychiatrist Dr. Loretta Bender began electroshock therapy on children she labeled with autistic schizophrenia. The children were strapped to hospital beds, electrodes fixed to their heads, and jolts of high-voltage electricity sent through their brains. Their bodies convulsed, their eyes rolled back, and they slipped into unconsciousness. Yet Bender insisted on calling this torture a treatment. Some children endured this for weeks, others for months, every single day subjected to shock after shock. Families gave consent, hoping their children would get better, but instead the children were left even more traumatized. Some stopped speaking altogether, others sank into depression or showed signs of severe stress, and many suffered permanent neurological damage. As if that wasn't enough, Bender later expanded her experiments, dosing children with LSD. The trauma only grew worse. For nearly 30 years, hundreds of children endured this abuse. And while today such experiments are banned, Bender herself was never punished. In fact, she was celebrated as a pioneering child psychiatrist. But tell me, does someone who inflicted this kind of suffering on children really deserve respect? Orphanage isolation experiment. How long could you stay in a room with nothing but a bed, no people, not even sound, without going insane? In an orphanage in Pennsylvania, ruthless researchers isolated infants and toddlers in such rooms. The children were not even allowed to play on their own. Their goal was to study the effects of extreme loneliness on mental and emotional development. Although the plan was initially for short-term observation, some children were left alone for weeks, even months. The results were devastating. The children displayed severe anxiety, stress, and depression. Their speech and motor skills deteriorated rapidly. Despite all this, the researchers shamelessly defended their actions, claiming they were conducting an experiment of great scientific value. Even if it contributed to science, do you think it was acceptable to treat tiny bodies this way? Sadly, those responsible for this dark experiment, which is now strictly forbidden, received no punishment. Fernald radioactive experiments. The Fernald School in Massachusetts was a state institution for children with mental disabilities. Scientists from MIT and Harvard used these children in some of the darkest experiments of the atomic age. They fed them radioactive substances and watched the effects unfold. Some children were told, "You're special, you're joining the science club." For the first time in their lives, they felt proud, felt like they truly mattered. But they had no idea that the cornflakes they ate every morning were laced with radiation. They were given radioactive milk to drink, and blood samples were taken from them for days on end. The official reason? We need to understand the effects of nutrition in the atomic age on the human body. But in reality, it was all part of secret military research carried out by the Atomic Energy Commission. Parents were never told the truth. Even the consent forms only mentioned a vitamin and mineral study. Now imagine being one of those parents. How would you feel when you finally found out? Most of those children died young from different forms of cancer. Their families sued and were awarded $1.85 million in compensation. But no amount of money could ever give back the healthy years those children lost. Similar experiments were, of course, eventually banned. Willowbrook hepatitis experiments. This experiment deliberately infected mentally disabled children with the hepatitis virus, destroying hundreds of lives. It was nothing short of a massacre. In the 1950s, Willowbrook State School in New York was presented as a care center for children with disabilities. In reality, it was a living hell. When Dr. Saul Krugman and his team discovered a hepatitis outbreak at the school, they made a horrific choice. Instead of preventing it, they deliberately infected newly arrived healthy children, reasoning that they would catch it anyway. The virus was taken from the feces of already infected children and mixed into milk and food or injected directly. Families were deceived. They were told that the only way to enroll their children was to join the so-called special hepatitis program. Children who desperately needed care were turned into test subjects. Hundreds were intentionally made sick, many suffered for months, and some never survived. Krugman's defense? It was going to spread anyway, so we did it in a controlled way and observed. Do you think that justifies it? The experiment went on for 15 years. When the truth finally reached the media in the 1970s, public outrage erupted. Willowbrook School was shut down in 1987, but for thousands of families, the trauma never truly ended. Robbers Cave experiment. Imagine this. You send your 11-year-old child to summer camp hoping they'll have fun and make memories. But instead, researchers drag them into a dangerous game, one designed to turn children against each other. In 1954, at Robbers Cave National Park in Oklahoma, 22 boys were split into two groups. At first, they had no idea about the other group. Soon, each group built a strong identity of its own: flags, chants, symbols. Then came the manipulation. The researchers deliberately set the groups against one another. What began as simple competitions quickly escalated into hatred and violence. Those innocent boys turned into children who destroyed each other's belongings, shouted insults, even started fights. And the purpose behind all this? To prove how easily social identities can turn into conflict. Later, the boys were forced to work toward common goals, and while the hostility slowly faded, the trauma they carried could never truly be erased. The experiment caused huge controversy in the media, and similar social studies were eventually banned. MKUltra, mind control experiments on children. The CIA's darkest project, MKUltra, didn't just target adults. At the Allen Memorial Hospital in Montreal, Dr. Ewan Cameron gave LSD to kids. He would keep them asleep for days, forcing them to listen to the same messages on repeat through headphones. The goal? To wipe their minds clean and erase their personalities completely. One of those children was Linda McDonald. Cameron used her as a subject for 86 straight days. Every single day, she was given electroshock therapy, LSD injections, and recordings that engraved the question, "Who are you?" into the subconscious were played. When Linda finally woke up, she couldn't remember her own name or even recognize her family. Years later, the Canadian government, which had collaborated with the CIA, admitted to these horrific experiments. But Cameron was never brought to justice. Only after his death did it come out that the LSD doses he gave children were strong enough to be fatal even for adults. The more I read about these experiments, the sicker I feel. Do you feel the same? Some of the children had to relearn how to speak. Others never managed to live anything close to a normal life, left permanently scarred by the mental damage. Most of the CIA's documents were destroyed in 1973, but even the evidence that survived was enough to reveal just how horrific these experiments really were. So, tell me, out of all these experiments, which one do you find the most terrifying? Share your thoughts. Let's talk about it.